Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's BTN Group Content Solutions in the Know webinar. Today's topic is Mastering an Agile Approach to Travel Technology, and the content has been developed and will be presented and sponsored by FCM, so we're thrilled to have their support. My name is Jen Bankard. I'm the Senior Director of Content Solutions and Conferences. I have just a few very quick housekeeping items, and then I'm going to get out of your way and turn things over to our presenters for the day. If you've joined a webinar with us before, most of this should be familiar, although we do have one new feature that we want you to engage with today. If you have questions for our speakers or any need for technical support, you can use the Ask a Question panel located on the left-hand side of your screen. But today we are introducing a chat feature because we would love for you to engage with each other and engage with our speakers. So to give you a little bit of practice with that, if you can locate the audience chat on your screen, if you want to just type in a quick hello and let us know where you're joining us from, and you can either share the city, or if you just want to say, like, I'm joining you from my home office, that is fine as well. So great to see if we can get some of those. And again, if you're having, so we've got someone who put hi from Sweden. Love that someone is joining us from Sweden. But you put that into the Q&A. So want to look for the audience chat feature. And yes, now we're seeing we've got folks from Philly, Kansas City, Fort Lauderdale, Michigan, Texas. Excellent. So it looks like everyone has found the chat. So wonderful. We do have a slide deck today with some great information. So if you want to save a copy of that, you can just go to the event resources on the left side of the screen, and you can save that to your computer. We are recording today's webinar, so you'll receive a link to the recording within 2 hours. And with that said, I am going to give a quick introduction and turn things over to our speakers. And then I'll help to provide a little more guidance on where to find the chat feature to help you differentiate it from the Q&A. So our speakers for today, we've got John Morhous and Joe Lloyd, both with FCM. So John and Joe, I'm going to turn things over to you and get out of your way.
Thanks, Jen, and hello, everybody. It's really nice to see where everybody's coming in from. Sorry, I just got distracted reading through the chat to see where you all are. I'm coming at you today from Dubai, so travel has started again for me, so I'm quite excited to be back in a hotel room. So hopefully John and I are going to shed some light on travel technology tech stacks today. So I'm really pleased to be having this chat with Jomo. Although I have to say I'm feeling a little outgunned to be discussing tech stacks with you, Jomo. But
you're not.
you know, I'm going to do my best to hold my own in the discussion. But I think let's start slow, shall we? Let's ease in gently and let's talk a little bit about tech stacks. So I hear that expression all the time. People talk about developing tech stacks, delivering tech stacks, agile tech stacks. Let's just start right at the beginning. What's a tech stack, John?
It's a great question. From my vantage point, you know, I've put up a couple of different types of stacks that are out there in the world just to kind of make sure we clearly answer what tech stacks are not. Your first is your pancake stack. I think we all could love a good pancake every once in a while. Second, that all-important money stack. I think we all are at some point looking for a big pile of those to fall into us. Third, which my kids gave me as an idea, was the Jenga stack. I think we've all played a game of Jenga here and there and had fun building the stack, but had a lot more fun trying to find the pieces that fell on the floor and where they all went. And then lastly, the hay stack, which is probably more close to where I am. I'm not in Dubai. I'm in Boston, and we've got a lot more hay than sand out here. So that one is another stack that comes to mind. But to answer the question specifically around what is a tech stack. So a technology stack by its actual definition is really a list of the applications and the software services that a product uses to run itself, right? There are tech stacks in every bit of software that you use today, whether it's a mobile app on your phone, whether it's the Outlook or the web browser that you're running on your computer, or whether it's cloud platforms like Amazon or Netflix. There is a host of technology solutions that sit underneath those that provide those services to run. And there's various layers of that stack, which is generally how you build it. So on the screen, I put some very general technology stacks that are out there. I mean, we've got some for lead generation from the marketing side of the fence as an example of some marketing software type of components. There's some stuff in there for finance software. And then on the right-hand side, you get down to a bit more of a logical type of technology stack that doesn't go into specific products, but really talks about the core components that we are able or are using as part of the combinations or part of the different components of a software architecture to build the overall product and stack that we're delivering.
Okay.
When we get sorry, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
There you go. No, that's okay. You've just gone straight to it. So I wanted to say, from within a travel stack, how does that look and what does that look like? Because from what you just described there with the whole Netflix and all of those different things, it should be a relatively seamless experience. So how does that look and live in the travel program world?
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I think I probably went ahead too fast in the slide deck. But yeah, in the context of business travel, I mean, I think our industry has a lot of buzzword bingo that goes on. A lot of words come across and they turn into overall vernacular, even if there isn't really direct meaning. I mean, the software technology stack, the slide that I showed you before, is much more geared towards technology software platforms and products. In the context of business travel, the tech stack is more commonly referred to as the different services and programs and components that you use to manage that traveler's end-to-end journey. Now, on the screen, I put together a really simplistic journey that a traveler would go on. A traveler like yourself heading to Dubai, for meetings, the various phases that Joe is on right now, right? In her big trip to Dubai to get out. And again, these are changeable. These aren't like, comment, or these aren't like, tried and true. They're interpretable by different companies in different ways, but I just kind of generalize the different phases that are out there. First and foremost, there's an intent to travel. Everybody gets notified around how you're given the opportunity or desired, or the need is created for you to travel, right? Somebody calls you, somebody emails you, says, hey, can you come to Dubai this week? That intent is loaded on various technologies that are out there. A lot of companies now have authorization solutions in front of that. So before you can even start looking at options to get where you want to go, you've got to get the approval to do so. And there are various tools out there that do that, including some of the ones that we provide with an FCM. On the search and book side, everybody focuses on search and book, from a tech stack perspective. It's really only one phase of the overall journey. I mean, the booking side can take upwards of maybe 30 to 60 minutes, depending on what you're doing. Whereas the overall trip, this entire journey could be 2 to 3 weeks, depending on how far in advance or how long it takes you to do your expense reports, which can take me some time to do. There's those tools that are there. There's that pre-travel phase, where you're about to go tomorrow and you're checking the weather and hopefully you're making sure you didn't need a visa to get there and not applying for it at the last minute. And those risk management items like COVID stuff that's very specific now.
I was going to say PCR test or not to PCR test. That is the question.
That is the question. I'm pretty sure Shakespeare said that at some point, but yeah, no, it's all of those things are the pre-travel before I get on the plane or get to the airport, the stuff I have to know. And then obviously there's the on-trip stuff and the post-travel and that all exciting and lovely expense and reimbursement phase that we all eventually go through, since we're not paying for it ourselves in most cases and looking to get reimbursed for the stuff that we did. So the tech stack really comes down to all of the different solutions that you're using in this overall ecosystem in the journey. And again, it's not 100% comparable to what you're seeing in the software industry or what I described with some of the solutions before, but it's our version of it. And it's really important to kind of focus on what are those key products that you're using in that stack.
Okay, so from what you've just described there, it's kind of one of those where even if I'm not using a booking tool, I can still be surrounded by a tech stack. Even if the booking is done offline, there's other tech stack bits around the process. Am I oversimplifying? Or, it's not that you have to have a whole end-to-end tech stack process. It can be done in component parts.
Without question, and absolutely, it's kind of like that Jenga stack that I showed before, right? They build upon each other to create the whole solution. You can't have a really cohesive and powerful end-to-end experience unless you've got solid components in your stack to deliver on that. But each individual part is just as important. I mean, you need to be focusing on that intent and authorized piece as much as the search and book, but as much as that what you're getting on the on-trip experience as well, because it's part of the entire journey in that ecosystem. So, and yeah, some of those aspects may not be a movable component for different programs. You may have a corporate mandate to use Concur expense globally, and therefore some aspects of this are already solidified as to what they are, but other parts of the overall stack, are able to be looked at and are equally important to make sure you've got something that your travelers, really enjoy working with.
Cool. Okay. All right. So that's making sense. But so another thing that is always sort of shrouded in mystery to me when I hear tech people speaking is the phrasing of agile and waterfall, and so just sort of spell it out to me in terms of what does that really mean. So in terms of the phrase agile, what does it mean to have an agile stack?
Awesome. All right. Well, here's some examples of things that are quite agile. Ben Stiller in one of my favorite movies, Dodgeballs, he was quite agile, evading getting hit by
ball.
But yeah, the D's of Dodgeball, without question. Cheetah, another super agile creature, much faster than I will ever be in my life, but something that can move very quickly from point A to point B. Your good old speedboat, for the fans out there that like some water sport. And then, of course, our athletic comparison to agility. But I don't really think you're talking about any of these examples. So what I wanted to talk a bit about was
I'm not sure. Sometimes the trip through the airport can feel a bit like dodgeball, but yeah.
Yeah, no, it absolutely can. When we talk agile from a tech stack perspective, and we talk agile from a software component, we're really talking about iterative development approaches, versus what we call a waterfall or big bang approach. And on the screen, I put, just a couple of examples of the differences between the two of them, right? So classic technology projects and development, classic, and someone really is going to town with the dodgeball example in the chat, which I love. The classic way of building software was what we would refer to as a waterfall approach, meaning that you would do a whole bunch of requirements and design and development, and then essentially deliver your outcome in one big bang. Like the project would be completed at this date going forward at this time period downstream. But in today's world, we often do what's known as a more agile, where we're doing iteration, right? So as opposed to everything ending at one big end result on the end of it, you're going through different parts and pieces in smaller chunks. And your ability to react to changes is really much greater in that environment, because you're able to react and incorporate some of those small changes into the overall process overall. So when we talk about agility within your technology stack, we talk about some of these individual components. It really comes down to your need to continually make small changes and tweaks to the overall program to ensure that you're getting to your end objective. It's just not going to be some huge big bang at the end. It's going to be a delivery of several smaller bangs along the way, if that makes sense. To kind of talk through what you need to do, from a business travel context, is again really driving around how that continuous improvement happens. So when we're looking at those technology stacks, when you're looking at ways to architect the different components of your travel program, you need to be thinking agile, thinking in an agile way, in looking at small different components that you can put into the program, reacting to the changing landscape that's actually happening. So as an example, the last couple of years, we've had some of the most dramatic changes in landscape from a travel standpoint that I think the industry's ever seen. I mean, in terms of, COVID requirements and restrictions, different things that were happening in that end of it, those were wholesale changes to the overall travel experience that I think all of us were dealing with in some way, shape, or form. If you had a big waterfall type of approach where you would spend all sorts of time up front doing requirements and fact finding, and then maybe integration, development, it would take forever to roll those kind of changes out. The macro issue could have been come and gone by the time you actually got around to it. So when you work in that kind of agile component and you work in that kind of agile way, you're essentially just continually evolving and doing things in those small and bite-sized pieces. Excuse me. And it really comes down from the context of being focused and flexibility in the approach that you're doing, but also in your decision making and those technology choices that are there overall.
Okay, so small increments. I love that. So when you're thinking of the tech stack, who should it be built for? Who's the person in mind? What's the view that you want in terms of how it should look when you're building it? Because if I think about stakeholder engagement in a typical kind of consulting project that we do, we kind of map everybody out, and they all have different interests and different skin in the game. So how does that work when you're looking at building a tech stack?
Yeah, and if you don't mind, I'll use one more visual to help describe that. This is a visual that a colleague of mine showed me a couple years back, and I've used continually because I think it describes it the best way possible, right? So this is your classic tie-in of user requirements versus actual experience in how you manage those two pieces. So on the left, you'll see the joyous parents looking at the fresh new mobile that they just purchased for their baby, and it makes all sorts of great sounds and it moves, and they absolutely love it. And then if you look at it from the baby's perspective, clearly it's a little bit of a different view, from the mobile. This is very, very often what we see as a challenge, in the business travel landscape. And what you typically have would be requirement gathering and stakeholders that are telling me or explaining to me what their components of the overall piece are. They've got a security, they've got a compliance requirement, they've got some issue with duty of care or finance and payments. They're being very literal in terms of what they're looking to be achieved. And in many cases, we just run to try to achieve those objectives, just run wholesale headfirst into trying to do it, because we want to achieve the satisfaction of those stakeholders. But we very often overlook the experience that we're therefore delivering to the people that we're impacting by this change. And in some cases, the two are completely in sync. In many cases, they're not in sync. And you get situations like this where you've built a process that is meant to satisfy your stakeholders. Let's just use duty of care as an example. It's meant to securely collect authorization for a person to travel, if they're going to a high-risk location or something that's going on. But maybe the form to fill it out is contingent on having, Internet Explorer 11.0 and doesn't work on your phone, and the person that's actually booking travel through the mobile app can't even easily get to it. So it's little things like that in the process that we often see as some of the major issues when you get too heavy on one side of the fence versus the other.
So I just wanted to ask you around the role of the TMC in all of this. When, if we sort of stay in our lane, when we talk about these tech stacks, it feels like the TMCs have something of a pivotal role, or is it something that each organization can build? And I'm kind of leaning towards you, Catherine, in terms of the question that you put in there. Hey, how are you? And, I think it's going to sort of lead a little bit to your question here, Catherine, because she was quite interested to know, the technology that gets implemented, how easy is it to be flexible between them, talking primarily of an online booking tool. So, John, maybe you can talk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, no, I mean, I feel as if the TMC in today's world, obviously I'm biased in this conversation because I work for a large global TMC. They play a very critical role in this overall equation. And I think it comes down to some decisions that companies need to make, in that process of how they design their program and how their TMC plays into that overall equation as a provider. So as an example,
Right.
there's a bit of a dynamic that each of the travel managers and each of the people that run the program need to understand, right? It's that intersection of the TMC and what services they provide, their requirements as a buyer, and then where there potentially are gaps in those requirements, what solutions are out there from a product perspective to be able to fulfill and meet those different gaps. So the way that we talk to customers about this is trying to evaluate it essentially in a couple of different angles. The first thing to do is really assess the TMC's capability and what they're able to provide in that overall equation. And the way that we describe it is by essentially three types of TMCs that we see in the marketplace overall. I'm not going to go draw out specific ones and name different ones in the competitor landscape around this, just for fairness. I will say that we'll probably be the second one, FCM is, but we'll talk about that in a second. The first thing to assess is, does your TMC do it all, right? And this is starting to be increasingly common, in the market where you've got platform-based approaches from a travel management perspective. There's a lot of benefits to this kind of environment where it's a superior, in many cases, user experience from A to Z. Everything is done cohesively, through that TMC. Everything is thought through from a full end user standpoint, all the way up and down. The drawback is the flexibility may not be there. So if you go back to that previous topic and you've identified a gap in your program with a certain service that you're looking for, then you may then have gaps in what they're providing and not the opportunity to fit a third-party tool in. A great example that I could say in real time, a few years back, 3 to 4 years back, rate reshopping became a huge need for most of our travel buyers. They were looking for advanced capabilities in rate reshopping, and there were several startups in the market, some of them still operating today, that did a great job with some really good rate reshopping tools. But not everybody could actually adapt to them. And some of those customers, some of the managers on the phone right now, were working with TMCs that didn't really allow them to integrate those third-party tools to enable those solutions to happen. So as you move up that stack, the second group you get of TMCs, and again, this is kind of where I would put FCM, is a mix and match. Where you've got a significant amount of your own internal investment in terms of technology and solutions that you have, but you also have the ability and the capability to support third-party integrations into that tech stack. Most TMCs are increasingly moving into this space where they're trying to do a best of both worlds. So I think to answer the question that originally precipitated this, if your TMC is in this category, then it comes down to you assessing the capabilities of their product versus what you're seeing in the market, and then how difficult it may or may not be to integrate that in as opposed to using what they're providing you. And that's something that's fairly common in today's world around those different solutions and what they can provide. And again, increasingly, you're seeing a large number of TMCs have their own product capability in many spaces. I know we have a significant amount of our own capability in various aspects of our program, as an example, but they're also allowing third-party tools to come in and be able to work with those pieces as well. And the last is kind of that evolution one step beyond, where you've got a very open stack and open technology platform where you're allowing any number of different providers to come in and provide solutions on top of some of the common guardrails that you provide. And this is something that we're starting to see a few TMCs, a couple of startups in particular, approach the market with this way. There's nothing good or bad or wrong or indifferent about any of these approaches. Each of them have their own pros and cons. But from my perspective, it's just a matter of what you want to be doing. Do you want to be managing integrations and technology? Or are you looking to manage a travel program or a mixture thereof? I think we have a poll that's out there right now, if I remember correctly. Cool. All right. So in the poll, I think we kind of asked everybody to list out their current TMC approach and what works for them. We were getting some of the responses back now. It looks like the vast majority of people are in column B, where the TMC that they're working with does a mixture of both. There's a couple of people that are in column C and a couple from column A. So again, I think it goes back to that overall approach. So if you're looking to evaluate some of these different technology tools in your mix, in your overall ecosystem, you do really need to understand how your TMC plays into that and their ability to support it. Because if you think through that original tech stack convo that we had, that original traveler journey that we talked about before, and you've got a large part of that journey owned and managed by your chosen or preferred travel agency, you're going to have difficulty integrating different products into that mix unless they're able to support that. All right, so not sure if we have Joe back yet, but just a couple of other things that we wanted to, I think we got a few questions coming in. Hold on. In my opinion, which of those approaches do I think is most successful as opposed to which one do you think that we want? Oh, that's a very loaded question, but let me try to answer that right now. I think most customers that we talk to and most people in the industry that I work with think approach 3 is what they want. They believe that they want to be and have superior flexibility with all of the different products that they need. However, I think in many situations, either approach 1 or approach 2 is what they probably really need. Some customers are purely around managing travel in the components of travel. They're not needing to be fussed with the latest and greatest of the solutions that are out there. They have a solid need based off of the industry of what they're doing just to get people from point A to point B. Other people, I do think, have a little bit of mix and match. I put the vast majority of customers in column B as an example, and really making sure that they're trying to provide the best of both worlds, in those components. And there's been a question in the chat around real life examples of the 3 approaches. And again, this is an educational webinar. I would put a provider like a Trip Actions in bucket number 1, where you've got a much more end-to-end solution approach, very tech-oriented, a bit more limitations in terms of third-party tools that you could put out there. In bucket 3, I'd put like a Spotnata, who's coming on the market now with an open platform approach and trying to provide open accessibility and integration capability around all components of the stacks. In bucket 2, I put like an FCM, where we provide a strong foundation of our own technology products and services, but also allow some third-party integrations into that mix to allow some integration in third-party tools where we potentially have gaps or we have partners out there that may provide a better service than what we do. Great. So just to kind of sum up this topic and just in summation and wrap it all up while I think Joe is trying to dial in on the phone and join us back in the conversation. A couple of pieces to keep in mind while you think through this overall topic in this area. First and foremost, there's really no right or wrong approach to how you manage this. And I'll say that again, this is not a grading scale as to what's better or what's worse. There are pros and cons with everything. From the last example I gave as to illustrate, when you have a more closed environment, you are able to provide a much more superior user experience because you control all aspects of the experience. So there's a huge benefit to doing that if traveler satisfaction and having an end-to-end experience is what's really the biggest driver for your program. On the open platform side, however, there's a significant advantage to being able to use the latest and greatest technology that's out there to deliver value to your travelers and make those journeys the most excellent. And it may be more difficult to provide an experience that's perfect in that regard, but you're providing a lot more capability across that as well. So again, no right or wrong approach, just different ways of solving the problem.
Excellent. Okay. So for an agile end-to-end approach, as in the earlier diagram, how do you recommend a travel tech stack being set up? Are you focusing on microservices using APIs? Who's responsible for pulling it all together?
It's a great question. I mean, if you're looking at any technology stack in today's world, you want to be using the best and latest of the technology that's out there. Microservices are certainly currently the leading way of doing large scale integrations between varying platforms. And all microservices really are is to a different way of componentizing and breaking down large technology stacks and providing small services that operate in between them to make the development process a lot easier and scalable. You know, in an environment where you're building applications that touch lots of different areas, you know, as an example, let's say you're building a new solution to push a duty of care alert, you know, a COVID alert out to a traveler. You've got to be able to understand who the traveler is from a profiling perspective. You have to get their contact details, whether it's email, phone, or a text message. You have to have the content of the message. You have to understand where they're going, you know, from a location, what times they're going, you know, status of their vaccinations, and then pull all that stuff together to put a message out to them that says, don't forget to get your PCR test 3 days beforehand. A lot of data I just described to deliver a relatively simple message. So microservices are a way to allow those different systems to store those pieces of data or provide those different services and functionalities to talk in a very easy and fluid way. So to answer the original question, if you're going to build something today, you'll want to use microservices across the board. It's just the better way of building large scale applications. The challenge is assessing that across that traveler journey, because you're going to find in that process in your tech stack, there are some pieces that can't be easily moved. There are some pieces that don't have microservices enabled, and you've got to focus on the areas that you can based off those traveler needs.
Okay, so can you talk about a situation where in a mix and match scenario where one of the players, whether it's the TMC, the client, or the app provider, change or upgrade something on their back end, and any challenges that might be associated with that?
Yeah, I mean, going back to this picture in this diagram, when you're choosing to move beyond bucket 1 into bucket 2 or bucket 3, and you're choosing to support an environment where you're integrating different providers and potentially different software packages between those providers, you are choosing, whether you like it or not, to be in the software maintenance game. You now have to be mindful of upgrades and different types of platform changes and features and enhancements that happen. So to kind of go to, you know, one of the summary pieces I was getting at before, that last bullet, you've got to think about and be very thoughtful as you're designing that technology stack and you're looking at your user journey, how much effort you want to put into some of these different pieces. And like I said, there are some customers that are like, you know what, I've just got enough time to focus on making sure all of my people get safely from point A to point B in the most cost-effective way for our business. And they're fine with an all-in-one solution that meets those needs and not having the latest and greatest bell and whistle. There are others that are like, you know what, my remit or my team's remit from a travel management perspective is to work on some of these pieces because I've got advanced needs in these certain areas that a standard TMC doesn't support. And they're more in tune with managing the integrations, the software requirements, all those different upgrade cycles and things that happen. So there isn't, again, a right or wrong approach. It's just what's most valuable to you and your program. I do think, however, most travel managers underestimate the amount of effort required to manage these integrations. I mean, it is.
Well, you've just walked straight into the next question, actually, which is a beautiful bridge, which is agility involves many iterations. So how do you balance getting and implementing feedback from the stakeholders while also adhering to the deadlines of the different seasons specifically related to business travel, so sessions rather. So how do you manage those and get the right feedback and, really kind of build that stack?
Carefully, slowly, Yeah, I wish I had if someone had a perfect answer for that one, let me know what it is. And that's largely what I do all day long, but I mean, it's a process, right? And this is where, again, a lot of the very formative conversations we have with customers and prospects and various things that I talk to, it's really coming down to is you've got to decide what you want to be doing, within your program. Do you want to be spending your time managing a bunch of technology integrations, or do you want to be spending your time worrying about your stakeholders and supporting their needs and meeting the objectives of the overall business? And there is not a right or wrong answer because every program is a little bit different, but if you're being agile and you're choosing to use a more all-in-one type of solution for how you get things done, then you'll obviously spend a lot more time, integrating feedback loops into the overall process and trying to incrementally improve things, because you're not opening the hood of the car and looking at the engine. You're just worrying about when I turn the key that it starts up and it gets me where I want to go. If you're more on the other side of the spectrum, where you're a mechanic and you want to be fiddling with the engine and changing the tires and doing all the stuff that's there, that's fine. But also make sure you're resourced to be able to address and deal with the stakeholders and the questions that are there, and particularly get feedback from those users. Remember that infographic I showed before, where it looks great on the outside, it meets your stakeholder needs, but the users are seeing, something less desirable on their end.
Something else.
And you need feedback to understand that. You need feedback to understand that, yeah.
Awesome. So if somebody's just starting down this route and, figuring out which of the different 3 options they should go for, what would be the key bits of information that you would say, this is what you need to think of first?
The first thing I would do is to literally, talk to your TMC and figure out which of those 3 categories that they're in. You need to know your boundaries before you start trying to do much or do anything beyond that from a solutioning standpoint. Once you have that, it then goes into needs assessment and figuring out what the stakeholders in your business are looking for. And then after that, you identify your gaps and try to figure out how you're going to close them. In many situations, you may decide not to try to close them because they're too complicated. They're not able to be closed given what's going on. Maybe you decide it's time to change your TMC out and look at somebody who can support those needs. So there isn't really a prescription of how you do it from A to Z. It's just some, methodology around trying to understand the components in the equation that you can't change, and then working through the ones that you can change and going through that iteratively and evaluating things and collecting feedback and working with your stakeholders. Question 1, many TMCs have a rather slow process to update clients' travel policy changes and turn on profiles or unlock profiles and different feature restrictions. Other more tech-focused solutions have the travel manager to immediately access and do it themselves. Where does FCM's OBT fall within those 2 extremes? Great question. In our proprietary tech stack, we do allow the travel management the travel management team to make their own changes in some areas. In some areas, we still require the customer to work with us, primarily due to global complexity. Doing something that you think happens in one market, it sounds easy, could have a pretty wide-ranging impact downstream with other markets. So we're probably in the middle of that spectrum, probably a little bit closer to self-service. We do like to give people self-service capabilities over a lot of things, and in our latest versions of the tools that we offer have for a lot of that. But I would be foolhardy to say that we let everything get done, because sometimes you're not sure what you're doing and it causes problems, and it requires a bit more implementation and program management and project management to go through and execute a change.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. First and foremost, thanks to John and Joe for sharing their wisdom and their insights and their expertise and humor with us today. Thanks to all of you who have joined, not just from all across the country, but from all across the globe. Thanks for engaging with us. And thanks, of course, to FCM for their sponsorship of today's webinar. So as we close out, you'll be redirected to a very brief survey. We would very much appreciate your feedback. As I said, you'll be receiving an email within the next few hours with a link to the recording of the webinar, as well as a copy of the slides. And as always, you can access the replay of this webinar, as well as other past webinars on the Business Travel News website. Thanks for joining, and enjoy the rest of your day.